Once more, Madara, being bored of sitting around, walked about the base. Nothing was really happening, and he was itching to fight someone. Walking into the control room where Fu was, he couldn't help but notice that Fu was watching the Chunin Exams from years earlier, just before the Konoha Crush. "What did you change here?" Madara asked. "Nothing. Sometimes reality can be just as interesting as a what-if." Madara sighed. "When I joined you, I had hoped we would do something interesting. All of this talk of a new time war had me interested, but now I'm growing bored." Fu paused to give his full attention to Madara. "Are you unhappy?" Madara didn't answer. Fu sat there. "I suppose it would be quite remiss of me not to offer you something to do. Come here, I want you to tell me what you want." "I want someone to fight," he said. "Then come, let us make someone to fight for you. Someone worthy of you." Madara walked over and sat down. Fu began to think about it. He looked up at the screen. "Why are you watching official history instead of a what-if?" Fu took a quick peek at the screen before looking back with a smile. "I wanted to know more about the 8 gates. They reminded me of another technique from my world, called the Kaioken. I would like to know more about it, see the similarities, compare which might be superior." "Why?" "I experienced the 8 gates once from a man named, well, I sadly have forgotten it, but he awakened the 8th gate." As Madara looked at the screen, he spoke. "He wasn't that man, but he looked much like him." "Who, Lee?" Fu asked. "Interesting." He turned to face the screen. "Lee is a unique case. He's a boy born without the ability to mold ninjutsu, but his dedication is far beyond what anyone else could ever muster. Despite his failures, he's good at one thing, the 8 gates. He might even surpass his master in it." Madara's attention was caught. Surpass his master. Madara recalled his battle against Guy. He began to smile. "I want to fight that boy." "Lee? All right. Shall I send you down then?" "No," Madara said as he looked. "I want him to be the best he can be. A full potential version of him." "What do you have in mind?" Fu asked. Madara smiled. "Give him the ability to use ninjutsu." Fu's eyes lit up. He was shocked to not have thought of this himself. "Brilliant! If he's this dedicated without ninjutsu, then what would happen if we gave him access to ninjutsu?" Madara was growing excited. "That's the one I wish to fight," he said. Fu smiled. "Then let's get started." Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. A boy without the ability to utilize ninjutsu. That's who Rock Lee was. Living by himself like many other kids this era, his family was killed in the nine-tailed demon fox's attack. But was he bitter about it? No. The sad thing was that he never really knew his parents. He was but a babe, swaddled up, declared to have the best eyebrows of any baby born in Konoha. Rock Lee lived alone, raised himself alone, and because he had no direction in his life, felt the need to forge ahead on his own. Lee often studied what it was to be a parent and how to take care of a child. This was so he could be his own parent and help himself through anything, to be self-reliant and to make it all by himself. And one of the many things he learned was important for helping a child grow into a healthy adult was proper discipline, to make sure they were on the right path and to give them proper correction when they weren't. And so Lee began attempting to live a disciplined life, holding himself accountable for all of his actions. But all the same, he craved to become more than what he was. He felt as though, even if he was capable of making it by himself, he could never reach his full potential alone. And so he began searching for a surrogate family with which to give him direction and help him remain disciplined. To that end, he sought the academy, where he knew he could learn all the skills he needed to survive in the real world, as well as have something to give back to his village. To be a real shinobi. It excited him. It felt as though he had found his purpose. That was until he got the diagnosis. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, but it's just not possible." "What?" Lee was in shock. You see, for months upon months, for over a year, he threw himself into his training. He studied hand signs, he studied nature transformations, and he tried to cast ninjutsu. But for some reason, the jutsu would never activate. Neither ninjutsu nor genjutsu. He could do neither, and it was so frustrating. He was so far behind in class that the teachers began to suspect something wasn't right. Lee wasn't stupid by any means, and his dedication was greater than anyone else in class. Why he couldn't pick up even a simple ninjutsu, why he couldn't even create a crappy clone was confusing to everyone. So they sent him to a doctor. That's when they discovered it. He had a sort of rare deformity. You see, the human body possessed a chakra pathway system. That's where the power of a shinobi came from. This power flowed through any of the 361 tenketsu across the body. Ninjutsu was cast from hand signs that could be weaved, that guided the chakra into the shape it could be molded into. For the Hyuga, they could theoretically cast ninjutsu from any tenketsu across their body, as was the advantage of their Kekkei Genkai, but most couldn't do that. Even if they could manifest and control chakra to some level across their body, the only places strong enough to cast ninjutsu from was their hands and feet. That's where it was easiest to control. But this led into the issue that was Rock Lee's condition. The tenketsu in his hands and feet were still capable of simple feats like walking on a vertical surface or running across water, but they were unable to cast ninjutsu. It was like the difference between a Hyuga and a regular shinobi. The tenketsu in his hands were the same as ones anywhere else. They weren't the special kind most had, and because of that, despite having great potential in his chakra reserves, he had no way to utilize it. This crushed Rock Lee. He had already begun to assimilate everything shinobi into his life, and he was now facing the reality that it would be impossible for him to really be a shinobi. As he sat at home in the dark, he cried as he looked over the shinobi handbook. "It is okay for me to cry here. Nobody will see, and therefore it is not against the rules," he said as he looked at it. How could one ever be a shinobi without being able to do anything that shinobi could do? It was impossible, right? Well, no, it wasn't impossible. Lee refused to believe it. There were other avenues that shinobi took to become great. Taijutsu, Kenjutsu, Bukijutsu, these three did not require the same prowess as ninjutsu and genjutsu. Even though those two made up the bulk of a shinobi's ability, it was far from the only tool they could ever use. As Lee thought more and more about it, he realized that there was a strategy he could take. Having played many RPG games, he understood the concept of a build. The idea that some classes were better at things than others, or that depending upon the points you were granted upon a level up, you focused the points into the things that you could or would use, and neglected what you couldn't. It tended to be better to be a well-rounded shinobi, but it wasn't such a bad idea if he were to become a Tokubetsu Jonin. It would be better to be a specialist than to be nothing. Picking himself up in an emotional and spiritual fashion, he dusted himself off. "Okay, Tears, that is enough! We will do things our own way and be the best us we can be," he shouted. "I will focus on my training. I will become the best Taijutsu, Kenjutsu, and Bukijutsu specialist in the whole world." Lee would begin his training regiment. It was unforgiving, and many nights he would go to bed sore. His knuckles busted, his shins bruised. His continual striking had caused his bones to begin to crack, but in response, as the bones healed, they came back stronger and more rigid, something not too dissimilar from what he knew the practitioners of Muay Thai did, working hard to strengthen his bones. He would also exercise quite often, doing as many push-ups as he could muster, as many sit-ups as his stomach and back were able to do, eating mostly protein, making room for other things as well to stay healthy, as well as plenty of water and milk to help keep his hydration and calcium levels high. But there was only so much you could do on your own, especially when you didn't know how to proceed from there. Lacking any further guidance and watching his classmates pass him by to become genin, Lee found himself up against a wall. A hard stop. He came to realize that the only way to graduate from the academy was to have at least one ninjutsu mastered, and Lee couldn't do a single one. He tried to substitute with taijutsu prowess, but even then his form was sloppy, as he was only teaching himself. He was attempting to emulate what he saw others do and what he did on television, but since nobody was there to give him extra constructive criticism, there was nothing he could do to even acknowledge any problems, let alone fix them. And this showed in his displays. He realized that the only way for him to pass was to somehow pull off a ninjutsu of some sort, but try as he might, even the easiest known jutsu was impossible for him. He couldn't even initiate it. And so he continued to focus on what he was good at. But despite all of his hard work, he reached the point of recognizing that he'd never be accepted as a true shinobi. The realization of such a thing brought Lee to his knees. As tears streamed down his cheeks, even though he was in a public place, he didn't care. He could never be a shinobi, so what good would it be for him to follow the shinobi handbook? He could never fit in, and nobody would ever want him. Nobody would ever train him, and he would never ever reach the best he could possibly be. Despite his dedication, one small issue he was born with that he couldn't help had wasted him. He was wasted, and now as his world crashed around him, he realized in his desperation that he would never have a true family. It was at about this time that he was overshadowed by something large. "Have you come here to laugh at me?" Lee asked. "Are you here to poke fun at Dork Lee?" he asked. There was silence. "Well then, laugh. There's no way your words or actions can make me feel any worse than I already do." "Get up," the voice said. Lee sat there silently for a moment. "I said, get up," the voice said. "What is the point?" Lee asked. "If I get up, I will only fall over again, constantly falling for all eternity. Why do I even fight it anymore?" "This is a real shame," the voice said. "Disgraceful." "I am a disgrace?" Lee asked. "You say that so easily for someone with talent. If I had even a drop of the potential in ninjutsu that you have, I would have become a genin ages ago." "I'm saying it's a disgrace to see such a dedicated shinobi give up on his dreams." Lee was silent for a second. "I gave up on them because they are impossible for me to achieve." "They're only impossible if you believe they're impossible," the voice said. "You've come so far, and you still have a ways to go, but have you ever heard that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with but one step? You've been walking so long, but you don't realize the progress you've made, or the potential paths you can take." "I do not see a path forward for me. My journey has reached the end. I'm done for." The voice sighed in disappointment. "You can't see where you're going, but I do." The figure squatted down next to Lee. "I see something in you that nobody else does. Something not even you see in yourself." "And what is that?" Lee asked. "I see potential. The potential to be more. The potential to prove yourself right. To reach the end goal of your nindo. To prove that even one born without the blessings of talent may one day themselves surpass even legends who had the blessings. But what you need is direction. You need a master. A tree doesn't grow unless it's in the sunlight. No matter how hard it tries, it never gets far. You need the light of knowledge and wisdom shining upon you if you wish to go far enough." "I do not have a master to rely on," Lee said. "I cannot even become a genin. How can I find a master?" "You're looking at him," the voice said. Lee stopped for a moment and turned to see a man with a large smile and brows as big as his own. "Allow me to teach you. Let me show you what is possible for one without talent." And from that point on, Guy began to tutor Lee. He told Lee that his prior assumption was correct. If he was incapable of ninjutsu, then taijutsu was a good fallback. The inability to develop his prowess in the common techniques of shinobi was well met by the decision to max out what he was good at. So they continued. All the places where Lee displayed issues, Guy would offer criticism and help him perfect it. He would help Lee save time in training by offering him better ways to maximize his gains with minimal effort and time, which freed Lee up to continue his training in more arduous ways. Lee saw his abilities skyrocket past everything they were. That was when Guy began to teach him how to utilize the first gate. When he taught it to Lee, he charged him that he should only ever use it to fulfill his nindo. So Lee made it a part of his self-rule, and with his technique mastered, he displayed it before the proctors at the academy's testing. As soon as they saw it, they recognized it as a high-ranking forbidden jutsu. The fact that this child could utilize it spoke of his potential as a shinobi, and due to this, they passed him. Lee had finally fulfilled the first major step of his dream, which was to become a genin. From here, Lee continued his training to awaken more and more of the gates within himself, and continued the missions he was given by the village, serving faithfully. Despite that, he was still overshadowed by Neji's genius, which was quite debilitating for his confidence. But with Guy there to help him get back up on the horse, they continued. "Do you remember how you said if you can't do 1,000 kicks, then you do 1,000 punches? It's your training regimen." Lee nodded. Guy continued. "Why should it be any different between you and Neji?" Guy said. "Using failure as a path that forces growth is how a genius works," Guy said. "If you can't beat Neji, then you will master the second gate. And if you can't master the second gate, then you will train your body and utilize the first so much that the second becomes easy. If you can't succeed at this, then find something else you can succeed in. Training to failure is the most powerful way to increase your strength. Eventually, what you fail at, you will slowly begin to succeed at, and eventually, you'll achieve your goals. You'll have mastered all of the gates, and then you'll surpass Neji. Lee understood. As a way to raise his spirits, Guy would present Lee with the same kind of tracksuit that he himself wore, including the weights that came with it. He would even cut Lee's hair into the same fashion as his own. He spoke. "Listen, Lee, with this suit on and this hairstyle, you now not only represent yourself, but me as well. Be sure to act with honor and dignity, and above all else, never give up again. So long as you wear this suit, you will do so in a way that honors the teachings I give to you. It is an important responsibility that I present to you because I think you're ready for it. Do you accept?" With tears in his eyes, Lee spoke. "I do, Guy-sensei! I am ready for this responsibility!" From there, Lee continued to train his hardest, even managing to master 5 of the 8 gates. His progress was impressive, but he wasn't finished yet. Madara watched, as did Fu. "Do you think he's ready?" Fu asked. Madara nodded. "Yes. He's been training a lot, and has gained quite an affinity for his 8 gates. I think he's ready for it now." Fu giggled and was hardly able to contain himself. He did so much without ninjutsu. I wonder what he can do with it. How far will he go? As Lee got home from training late into the night, his body was throbbing. His eyes were drooping. He could hardly keep himself up. Collapsing into his bed, he didn't lay there more than a few moments before his body completely shut down, taking him into the world of dreams. It was during this night that a certain jolly, pointy-eared man decided to pay him a visit. And no, it wasn't Santa Claus, per se. It was Fu, dressed like Santa Claus. "Ho, ho, ho! I'm here to bring all the good little boys and girls the ability to use ninjutsu," he said in a deep voice. Kneeling down to Lee as he laid in the bed, he grabbed the boy's hand. Looking at it closely, he placed his hands upon it and utilized yin-yang release, creation of all things technique to transform the tenketsu in his hands and feet into the kind required to utilize ninjutsu. Furthermore, as a good way to get him started, Fu was certain to ensure that the chakra nature his chakra was native to was wind release. Why was that important? Well, in all things that Fu knew about chakra, he had come to learn that wind release was the hardest nature by far to learn and master, so giving him a wind release chakra nature would ensure that he'd have a leg up on his training, making it easier for him to learn that nature, meaning he could spend time learning other natures as well. As soon as he did this, a massive spike in Lee's chakra could be felt, as chakra was expelled from every tenketsu in his body at once, the force of which was enough to wake Lee. Lee looked over. "Santa?" Fu smiled, wearing his red coat, hat, and beard. "Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, Rock Lee. I must go now and deliver my presents to the rest of the good little boys and girls. Ta-ta!" Fu then teleported out. The next day, Lee was up training early. Guy would find him there, looking at scrolls, practicing hand signs. Quite a unique thing to do, given he had no capabilities to use them. "Lee, why are you studying hand signs? Hoping to memorize them so you know what jutsu your opponents are weaving?" Lee looked back. "Guy-sensei, look!" He began to form hand signs. "Wind release, vacuum sphere!" Suddenly, Lee let air out of his lungs, which shot out as a multitude of dense air blades that cut through anything he blew them at. Guy was absolutely astounded. "How is this possible, Lee? I saw your medical file. This should be impossible." Lee nodded. "I know, but someone came to me last night and gave me the ability to use ninjutsu." Guy was surprised. "Really? Who?" Lee thought about it for a moment. "I believe it was Santa Claus." "Santa Claus?" Lee nodded. That's impossible," the doctor said upon looking at Lee's next diagnostic scan. "What is it, doctor?" Guy asked. Lee sitting right next to him. "The scans are coming back that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the tenketsu in his hands and feet." Guy looked at the scans side by side. The doctor spoke. "The one on the left is what his tenketsu used to look like. Not developed at all, barely enough to expel any chakra. The one on the right is what they look like now." "They're properly developed," Guy said with shock in his voice. "How is this possible?" "That's the thing, it shouldn't be. There's no medical explanation for it." Lee began to jump up and down, tears in his eyes. "Did you hear that, Guy-sensei? It's a Christmas miracle!" "But Lee, it's the summertime." Yes, but only in the northern hemisphere. This caught Guy off guard, but he decided to roll with it. He walked Lee out of the hospital. Maybe we should celebrate, all of us together. We'll go out and get something to eat. Restaurant of your choice, Lee, I'll cover it all. Get whatever you want. Really, Guy-sensei? His master nodded his head. Yes, you deserve it. Lee, with his heart filled with optimism for his future as a shinobi, would party hard with his friends, who had become more like family. From there, Lee continued to learn how to use ninjutsu, spending much of his time practicing techniques of the style he was good at, while also trying to teach himself other nature transformations and techniques. He managed through his training to teach himself lightning release, even begging Kakashi to teach him the Chidori, though Kakashi refused. Why not? Lee begged. You don't possess the ability to see at that speed. Your senses aren't strong enough. You'll get tunnel vision and become a sitting duck. I wouldn't be so sure, another voice said. Kakashi looked up and saw Guy standing there. Guy, you really want me to teach Lee the Chidori? Why? Because I think he can handle it. Lee's true speed goes beyond that of the average shinobi, and he's taught himself to react at speeds very quickly, even with tunnel vision. Kakashi scratched the back of his head. I don't know about this, Guy. Please, Lee begged, hitting his knees. Guy stood there with a look on his face that basically asked if he could really say no to Lee's dedication. Just for old time's sake, what do you say, my eternal rival? I've not even taught this technique to my own students, Kakashi said. But looking down at Lee's desperation, he gave in and decided to teach him the technique. It was rather difficult for Lee to learn, but through his hard work and dedication, he found himself able to do it. Just as Kakashi said, there was tunnel vision, but Lee was used to going at high speeds. His training had pushed his body to the limits of what might be called human, and this resulted in Lee being able to compensate in his own unique way against the downside of the technique. Just be careful with it, Kakashi said as he finished. Lee offered a deep bow. Thank you so much, Kakashi-sensei. I will use your teachings for the betterment of our village. This was enough to bring a smile to Kakashi's face. I'll hold you to that. Kakashi would then leave. From this point on, Lee continued his own training, attempting to learn new ninjutsu as he discovered it, teaching his hands how to weave their signs fast enough that it could surpass the speed of others, to the point it took dojutsu to see. It wasn't much longer after that the Chunin Exams came around. Guy allowed his team to join. Before this, however, Lee decided to scope out his competition. The one he was excited about the most, other than Neji of course, was Sasuke, the last Uchiha. He had a reputation for being a genius in his own right. Lee would use Sasuke to prove that hard work was all that was required to surpass natural talent. He would wait for Sasuke before challenging him to a fight. At first, he was attacked by a kid in orange. Lee would knock him aside effortlessly. He was here for Sasuke and Sasuke only, and maybe also for Sakura. He found her adorable. Regardless, he challenged Sasuke directly, and Sasuke accepted. Lee would display his taijutsu prowess, amazing him. However, before he could finish him off, Guy appeared and chastised Lee for using his teachings in such a vain way. Lee apologized, and Guy accepted, but this didn't mean that Lee would escape any repercussions. Lee had to do many laps around the yard as punishment. Despite that, Lee felt like it was worth it, because now he was getting very excited. He was finally getting the chance to prove himself against even the greatest of his generation, and he wouldn't stop until he was on top. The first test was written, and was far harder than expected, but with the benefit of Tenten's help, Lee passed it with flying colors. The second round was the Forest of Death. Guy had informed his team to remember the mission, as well as the virtue of patience. A spider does not chase the flies. It instead waits for the flies to fly into its web, and then it takes them, Guy said. Be like the spider. Take things slow, don't rush it, and remember that what's important is your own survival. After that, you can go in for the kill. And that's just what Team Guy did. For the first couple of days, they spent time gathering supplies, such as food, water, finding shelter, and anything they could use as valuable tools. Once they were settled and had a safe base to return to, Lee and the others decided that they would hide their scroll so that should any of them ever be captured, they could not give up the scroll. Finding a safe place for it, they would bury it there and leave. From there, they decided to begin scouting for anyone else with the opposite scroll. Lee went off on his own, but during his search, he spotted the girl he'd met earlier, Sakura Haruno, fighting a group of skilled shinobi that Lee recognized as from the Hidden Sound. He rushed to her aid and helped to protect her. He wasn't sure if she had the scroll they were looking for, but the noble, heroic, and chivalrous heart that beat in his chest demanded that he not leave her to fend for herself. So, with all of his might, he rushed in. As he weaved hand signs, he released a wind-release vacuum sphere at them, to which they barely dodged. Lee would then take the time he had to rush across the battlefield and attack their commander as he was still in the air, unable to dodge. Grabbing him, he threw him to the ground before following him down. Zaku attempted to cushion Dosu's fall, but before he could do anything, Sakura struck him with shuriken. The sound of the fight echoed through the woods, drawing Neji and Tenten's attention. Did Lee already find someone? Tenten asked. Neji, using his Byakugan, could see the battle. He's outnumbered. We better hurry. They rushed to the site of the battle to aid, but it was at about that time that Sasuke appeared, his chakra skyrocketing. What is that? Tenten asked, hardly able to recognize Sasuke. It appears to be Sasuke. Sasuke savagely attacked Team Dosu and was ready to kill everyone. He probably would have too if it hadn't been for Sakura coming to him to calm him down. Neji got a hold of Lee and Tenten. It's best we leave. But what about the scroll? Tenten asked. As if Sasuke heard their words, his face turned toward them. Neji shook his head. It's not the kind we're looking for. Let's just get out of here. And so, as the three of them left, they sought someone else to take the scroll from. Finding their targets, they defeated them rather soundly, claiming their scroll. Returning to their base, they took up their own scroll and proceeded to leave for good, heading toward the tower in the center. Upon entering, they were congratulated for passing the test by their mentor, Might Guy. You three did very well, he said. Despite what he was saying, his face seemed more grave than usual. What is it, Guy-sensei? Lee asked. Is something wrong? Guy shook his head. Nothing's wrong. I'm just grateful that you three succeeded. I guess I was a little worried for you. There is no need to worry, Guy-sensei. You've trained us well, Lee said. Guy smiled at them. He had told a bit of a fib. You see, the bodies of some of the Kusagakure shinobi who were supposed to be there, who had signed in and were currently participating in the exam, had been found without their faces, insinuating that the people in the Forest of Death were not really who they were supposed to be. This brought about the question of what they were doing there and why. So in a way, Guy was telling the truth. He really was worried for his students, but why he was scared he'd kept from them. I'm so proud of you three for making it this far, he said. There's one more phase to this exam. If you complete it impressively enough, you may be awarded the title of Chunin. Get some rest, you're gonna need it. And so Team Guy spent time resting, though for Lee, that meant getting in a little light training to keep himself on his toes. When the third phase came around, they all met in the main hall where they were told they'd be facing each other in single combat. This was where individual team members would get time to shine alone without their mates. While the first and second test was a team test designed to test proper teamwork, information gathering, and dispersal, as well as teamwork in general, the third test was purely to see who was good enough to become a Chunin through nothing short of a tournament. It would be dangerous, as there were no holds barred. The only thing they weren't allowed to do was kill their opponent, but even if they did, the only thing that would happen is disqualification. This could very well be a fight for their lives. However, Lee was ready. There was nothing that could hold him back. He'd defied the odds before and had come out on top. Now was the time for him to do it again. Lee watched intently to see who he'd be paired against in battle. As he watched, he realized it was going to be Gaara. Everyone seemed startled, even apologizing to Lee for the bad luck. Lee wasn't intimidated though. Lee was more than ready to face Gaara head-on and kick his butt. He'd wait patiently, watching each of the battles as they unfolded. The first battle was between Sasuke and Yoroi Akado. For some reason, Sasuke was not utilizing any of his ninjutsu, which Lee found suspect. Why wasn't he? He asked Guy about it, and Guy said it was because Sasuke had a curse mark that would activate any time he used ninjutsu, and that if his curse mark activated, he'd be automatically disqualified. To Lee's surprise though, Sasuke began to utilize similar techniques to what Lee used against Sasuke during their previous duel. Looks like you inspired him, Guy said. This brought a smile to his face. In the end, Sasuke used the techniques Lee had demonstrated on him to pull a victory out. After this was a rather gruesome battle between Shino Aburame and Zabu Abumi, to which Shino soundly won, leaving Zaku, well, he probably would never be a shinobi again. That scene really did hit Lee hard, but he took a deep breath and recognized that this was the cost of being a shinobi. One day the same could happen to him, or he might have to do it to someone else. This was the cost of this dream. After this was Misumi Tsurugi versus Kankuro, with Kankuro coming out on top. And after that, Lee waited patiently for his own match. Many a match came and went. Lee had heard of Gaara, of his brutality and worse yet, his skill. It sounded as though he might be among the most powerful opponents here. The 9th match, the penultimate of the first half of the exhibitions. Only Dosu and Choji's match were to come next. After that, they were promised a month off to prepare, train, and rest. Lee was ready. He was going to bring everything, knowing that if he got a month off, he'd be more than ready for the return of the exams. Walking to the center of the arena, he was informed of the match and its rules, although he already knew them from watching the previous matches. Once all the formalities were out of the way, the match was allowed to begin. Lee offered a bow to his opponent, which was not reciprocated in any form. Only the judgmental, uncaring scowl of his opponent. Lee got into his favorite fighting stance, ready to commence. Gaara remained motionless, as if inviting Lee to take the first shot, which Lee attempted to do. However, all of his strikes would bounce off the sand as it moved to defend its master. Lee was surprised. He had read about magnet release, which was what he assumed this to be, but the fluidity of it was more than he would expect from someone Gaara's age. It was only more proof that Gaara was worthy of the full power that Lee would show him. The more he fought, the more it became clear that he could not get around the sand. That was when Guy said it. "Lee, feel free to go all out. This counts under the criteria of your Nindo." "Thank you, Guy-sensei. I will not disappoint." Lee began to take off his weighted gear. Flinging them to the side, bringing a pillar of dust from the ground below, he gathered his strength in preparation for awakening his gates. Like a flash of lightning, Lee was on the ground, dancing around Gaara so fast that Gaara could hardly see him. Lee began to go all out. Gaara would continue attempting to defend with the sand, but now Lee was getting lucky shots in. As he began to open his gates more, those lucky shots became all the more common until eventually Gaara's sand could no longer keep up. That was one issue he had solved with his taijutsu prowess, but as Gaara was being struck, it became clear to Lee that the entirety of Gaara's body was covered in a thick shell of sand, protecting him from attack. Lee would take a step back. Going up to his 5th gate, he decided to go at Gaara with everything he had. Striking him hard, hitting him with everything he had, he saw that the sand shield was still intact. He'd considered utilizing the hidden lotus, but stopped. He realized that blunt force might not be enough to break the shell. Instead, he needed piercing power, focusing everything into a pin dot instead of letting the armor disperse it evenly. If he did that, the shell would surely break, causing massive damage. And so, Lee held his hand down and funneled lightning nature chakra into his hand, forming the Chidori, something Naruto and Sasuke noticed. "Kakashi-sensei, isn't that your technique?" Naruto asked. Kakashi nodded. "It is." Lee would then begin to rush forward. His speed increased further by the 8 gates to the point that even Kakashi's Sharingan couldn't track it. Gaara lost track of him until it was too late. Lee appeared before him. Gaara sent up his sand to shield him. Lee plunged his hand through the sand and into the shell covering Gaara's body. The force was enough to go clean through the shell and into Gaara. Gaara cried out as Lee's hand pierced through his abdomen. Lee pulled back out. Lee was no expert at medical ninjutsu, but he knew about the human body enough to know that there were places that, while devastating, were survivable. Lee had aimed for just such a place. Gaara was so shocked by the pain and blood, something he had never experienced before, that he passed out. Shukaku, who would normally come out during the times Gaara was asleep, had no choice but to remain now, as Gaara might die without him, and if Gaara died while Shukaku was still inside of him, Shukaku would also die. The battle ended, and they carted Gaara off to be healed. Lee would return to the stands where he'd be congratulated by his team. "Did I do well, Guy-sensei?" Lee asked. Guy offered a thumbs up and a twinkling smile along with a wink. "You did me proud, Lee." He smiled with a sparkle in his eyes, only an inch away from falling to tears, but he remained steadfast. Lee would then watch the remaining battle. After this, the exams would be paused for a month. During that time, Lee continued to hone his skills day and night, growing stronger, more capable, learning as many ninjutsu as possible. But a month passes by like the blink of an eye, and finally the exams were to continue. Due to the wounds that Gaara had sustained and his insistence to leave, Kankuro and Temari dropped out, leaving only 3 matches remaining. The first match was going to be between Naruto and Lee. Lee would enter the stadium to the cheers of the crowd. Lee couldn't believe he had made it to this point. His dreams were coming true. He was only a couple of matches away from a Chunin position. As his battle with Naruto began, Naruto would summon his will, knowing that Lee was incredibly powerful, but there was something he could use to hopefully bridge that gap. Naruto began to make use of the Nine Tails' chakra to enter his version 1 form. He hoped that with this he'd be able to stack up against Lee. Lee, however, had been training intensely as well, and now he was even stronger and faster than before. Beginning the match without his weights on, he pulled a kunai and breathed wind release onto it to form a wind release vacuum blade. With his incredible speed, he stepped into one of Naruto's blind spots and swung his blade, the chakra cutting through even the chakra cloak of the Nine Tails. Naruto moved to the side. "Ow, bushy brows, that hurt!" Lee cracked a smile. "I am sorry, Naruto, truly. You know I would not normally do something like this to you, but I have a dream to accomplish. I wish to prove myself a worthy shinobi, despite not having natural talent, my ninja way." Naruto smiled. "I can't blame ya. I gotta prove myself too. I'm not gonna hold back." "Neither shall I," Lee said. They attacked each other once more, but this time Naruto formed a Rasengan and used it to knock away Lee's vacuum blade. Lee did a few backflips before weaving hand signs. "Wind release! Vacuum serial waves!" He exhaled and shot out multiple blades of wind all at once. Naruto avoided a few, but Lee did manage to hit him, which fractured his ability to dodge this set of attacks, icing him entirely. Naruto, unable to recover, was struck with the rest of the blades. Falling back, Lee activated some of his higher gates, rushed through, and smashed Naruto to the ground with a downward kick to the back of the head. Naruto tried to recover despite missing a couple teeth, but Lee offered a roundhouse kick, which knocked Naruto into the nearby wall. Naruto hit it with such force that he was instantly left unconscious. The match was called in Lee's favor. After this, Sasuke and Neji had their battle, which they hoped would clear the answer of which was better, the Sharingan or the Byakugan. Despite Sasuke's abilities, the Sharingan's observational abilities paled in comparison to that of the Byakugan, and when it comes to taijutsu techniques, Neji has the definitive edge. All Neji needs is one chance to get close enough to Sasuke to touch one Tenketsu in his arm, and suddenly, Sasuke loses all ability to use ninjutsu. Unable to weave any hand signs, Sasuke is at Neji's mercy until Neji catches up with him and finishes him off, leaving him paralyzed. With that, the match is over, and then comes the match between Choji and Shikamaru. Shikamaru manages to hold Choji down with his shadow paralysis jutsu, and defeats him, though he does not defeat him in a harsh way as they are teammates and have respect for one another. After this match comes the one that Lee's been training all of his life for. Guy appears in the locker room with Lee. "Are you nervous?" Lee nods. "I have been training my whole life for this, Guy-sensei. What if I have not trained enough? What if Neji is still stronger than I am?" Guy smiled. "Lee, if Neji is still stronger than you, then it simply means that you gotta put in extra work to prove yourself. It doesn't mean your dream is impossible, nor should it mean that you lay down after defeating him should you be able to do so here. You must continually grow regardless. Just do your best. Don't worry about the outcome, and be ready for the next stage of your training no matter what happens." Lee smiled. "I will, Guy-sensei." After this conversation, Lee would be called out to the arena. As soon as he got out there, he would meet with Neji and offer a slight bow of respect. Neji would return it to him. Neji had gained respect for Lee due to his dedication, but the truth was obvious. A failure could never defeat a genius. Logic just didn't work that way, and so long as Neji remained a genius and Lee remained a loser, there was no other outcome than what was going to happen here. They got at a distance and prepared to fight. When the battle began, they would start by testing each other's taijutsu skills. Neji and Lee seemed almost evenly matched. Each would throw strikes, but neither would land. With each strike, their speed increased further, making the chances one of them failed to catch a blow a lot more likely. Lee would push this as far as he could, hoping to outspeed Neji. See, Lee knew that Neji's touch would paralyze him if he wasn't careful, so he needed to get Neji to make mistakes before he got fully warmed up. To that end, Lee's strikes began to land, knocking Neji away. Neji stepped back and wiped the blood from his lip. "I'll admit this, you've got skill, but I haven't even started yet. Byakugan!" The veins in Neji's eyes began to bulge as his Byakugan began to peer deep below Lee's skin at his chakra wells and Tenketsu. Lee felt a bit uncomfortable. If Neji could see through his skin, what else could he see with eyes like those? But it changed nothing. Lee was not anywhere near his peak either, and his secret weapons would be enough to counter Neji at every turn. As Neji came in again, the two continued to exchange blows. That was until Neji managed to tap 3 Tenketsu, one on each of Lee's arms and one sending chakra to his left leg. Feeling as though he had only one limb left to stand on, he knew he only had one shot. This was not something he'd be able to pull off again, meaning if he got struck by those blows again, it wouldn't end well. But he knew that at least for now, he wasn't in hot water. Lee would open up his inner gates. This would pop open the Tenketsu as well with the sudden burst of chakra. Able to move his arm around again, he was ready. Round 1 went to Lee, but round 2 was all Neji's. Next was round 3. This would be for all the marbles. Lee would rush at Neji. Neji's Byakugan was able to see and react to Lee's movements due to his 360 degrees of vision. Neji saw everything, and by the effort put into his training, he was fast enough to react. Lee was surprised that Neji could keep up with him in this gate, and even Neji was a little surprised, but he chalked it up to his belief in fate, and how it was just the logic of the world. A loser lost, and a winner won. That was all there was to it. As Lee began to run low on chakra, the 5th gate wearing him down, Neji began to gain purchase over him. It's over, Neji thought, giving a tap to Lee's leg, putting it out of commission. Lee hit the ground. Neji was on him in a second. Lee saw it coming, so he pulled out all his remaining chakra. Weaving hand signs, he spoke. Wind release! Vacuum great sphere! He took a deep breath and exhaled it at Neji, sending him flying against the wall, leaving him incapacitated. Lee managed to stand, and with what little power he had left, sent a surge of chakra through his Tenketsu to pop it back open. But with that, his 5th gate closed. Lee walked over to Neji to check up on him. I did it! I beat Neji! Lee began to jump up and down, newfound strength filling him as the crowd cheered his name. He couldn't believe it. He had tried for so long to be better than Neji and to prove his point that people who worked hard could beat those who were blessed. I did it! I fulfilled my nindo! I proved that people without blessings can beat people with blessings, he shouted. But at that moment, Neji spoke. You thought you proved anything. I had you there. The only reason you beat me was because you pulled out your special miracle. You beat me, sure, but only because you used your special blessing to do so. You proved nothing. You're still a loser. Just a cheating loser. Lee listened to what Neji said. As they carted Neji off, Guy was waiting for Lee as he came back to the locker room. Well, you finally did it. How do you feel? Guy saw Lee's concerned expression. What's the matter? You just proved yourself. You fulfilled your nindo. Aren't you happy? Lee looked up. Guy-sensei, I do not think I have, he said. I beat Neji, but I used ninjutsu to do it, something I did not normally have. It's made me wonder if I cheated. You can use ninjutsu now. That doesn't detract from the fact that you defeated him. It does, Guy-sensei, Lee said. See, I was not born with the ability to use it. And when I made my nindo, I did so from the place of believing that I never could use ninjutsu. My intent was to defeat Neji without using ninjutsu at all, but I didn't. I had to use ninjutsu to beat him. I do not think I did as I intended. Guy began to smile. You really are growing up, Lee, he said. Guy put his hands on Lee's shoulders. If you wish to defeat Neji through taijutsu alone, then I'll support you. But just know that the fact that you've come this far on only taijutsu is proof that you are a genius through only your hard work. Lee smiled. Thank you, Guy-sensei. After this, the final match between Shikamaru and Lee was set to take place. But just before the match did, someone cast genjutsu over the stadium, and Lee was knocked out. Lee didn't wake up until later in the day. By that time, he realized what had happened. Konoha had been attacked, and the Hokage killed. Konoha mourned the death of the 3rd Hokage for quite some time, but eventually they would need a new one. That's where Tsunade would step in. Lee had heard many things about Tsunade from Tenten, who had hoped to emulate her, so he knew Konoha was in good hands. However, an unusual event transpired in that Sasuke left the village, following 4 criminals from Otogakure who'd been partially responsible for the death of the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi. Lee was called up to help the team find Sasuke. To that end, a 6-man team was formed between Shikamaru, Kiba, Naruto, Choji, Neji, and Lee. One by one, the group began to peel off to fight the Sound 4 until only Lee and Naruto were left to pursue Sasuke. However, it was then that Kimimaro stopped them. Lee offered to hold him off while Naruto continued on. Kimimaro didn't attempt to stop Naruto. As the two stood there, Lee spoke. I will not let you get away with killing the 3rd Hokage either. Kimimaro sighed and then spoke. You can't stop Sasuke. He's dead set on becoming strong enough to kill his brother, and he'll kill anyone to do it. He has a determination in his eyes that tells me he will surpass all of us. Then he will make a perfect vessel for Lord Orochimaru. I will not let that happen, Lee said. As if you had a say in the matter, Kimimaro replied. From there, the two began to fight. Lee would pop a whiskey bomb that Guy had given him. Guy had given him this chocolate filled with special medicine in case of a situation like this. He told Lee not to use it unless it was against an extraordinary foe, and Lee could already tell just by looking that Kimimaro was stronger even than Neji. In a drunken state, Lee easily began to dodge the attacks thrown at him by Kimimaro, much to Kimimaro's surprise. His return strikes would be enough to knock the breath from Kimimaro. This completely confused him. Lee was not this strong when he arrived, and now he was capable of this? Was his drunken fist really that good? How had he practiced it? Lee continued to fight in this state, pushing Kimimaro back until eventually Kimimaro, having enough of it, activated his curse mark. Despite everything, Lee's drunken fist was not enough to handle this new form, so he had to awaken his inner gates. This quickened his metabolism, causing him to quickly burn off the alcohol and return to a more stable state. Kimimaro pulled out a bone blade and began to attack with it. Lee took a few steps back. Lee had made the decision earlier not to use ninjutsu unless the lives of others were in danger. That was a new self-rule he gave himself to help him accomplish his nindo, but considering that if he didn't stop Kimimaro here, he would attack and likely kill Naruto, this meant that it was no longer about him. He needed to be strong enough to use ninjutsu now. So, pulling a kunai, he utilized Vacuum Blade to give him the advantage. His blade clashed with Kimimaro's at high speeds. Despite Kimimaro being in his curse mark form, Lee was still stronger, and it became apparent that Kimimaro was at a disadvantage. Kimimaro was impressed. Few could push him like Lee was. Lee was a true prodigy, but Kimimaro could go deeper. There was something else he needed to show Lee. Suddenly, he entered his stage 2 curse mark form, which was even stronger than the last. With it, Lee was starting to be pushed back. At this rate, Lee knew that there was no way he was walking out of this uninjured, so he made the bold decision to welcome his injury if it gave him an opening. Among the things he'd been studying during his time off, Kenjutsu was one of them. With a flick of his wrist, he allowed Kimimaro's blade to pierce through him, but in a place he knew would not be fatal. Lee let out a cough of blood, but with all the strength he had left, he would take his blade and shove it into Kimimaro's heart. Kimimaro would stumble back a moment. The two wounded shinobi looked at each other. Kimimaro was in shock, but to some degree he thought he saw Kimimaro smile. He offered a bit of a nod before falling back, his life coming to an end. As things around him began to spin, Lee also collapsed. He didn't wake up until later. When he did, he was in the hospital. He was informed that the mission had failed, and that Kiba, Akamaru, and Shikamaru had all perished. Lee took this hard, feeling like he'd failed everyone, but Guy told him that this wasn't true. Sasuke had been branded a traitor for this, and the hunt was on to bring him back. Guy told him that if they did bring him back, they just might be able to salvage his life. Maybe he'd lose the right to be a shinobi, but he might get to live. However, given that Sasuke's whereabouts were unknown, all they could do was wait. "What do we do then?" Lee asked. Guy told him the simple answer: "We train." And that's the end of it for today. I hope that this gets a second part. If it does well, then maybe we can continue this story, but I guess that's really up to you, isn't it? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and leave a comment below. Feel free to share this video with your friends to increase the chances and likelihood of a second part being released. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified should that next part ever get produced, and while you wait and see, check out these other videos from our channel. Until next time, peace out.